Well, as you can see, good evening, everybody. A huge pleasure to welcome back Mr. Rob Bellin from Bellin. Sorry, no G at the end of Bellin, from the law firm Hammett, Bellin and Oswald. And Rob, you were telling me that your law firm started. Well, sorry, I've made a note. It's 1997. Is that right? Can you tell us a little bit about your law firm?
Yeah. Make a long story short, my partners and I were working at a different place for a few years, and we decided to break off in '97. We formed the firm, and we've been together ever since. So my partners are great. To be honest with you, no one's greedy. Everyone just wants to take care of the clients, do a good job, and so it's lasted. It's been great.
Yep. And so you're based, I believe, is it sort of Neenah, Appleton area?
Correct. Fox Valley, we're about 20 miles southwest of Green Bay.
Yeah. We know all about
Jeff Oswald. Yeah, I was at most of the trial when Avery was going on in 2006 or whatever.
Yep.
Oh, you still got me? I did a lot of interviews with Anjanette Levy, but then when Making a Murder came out, they showed Jeff. I don't think I made it in.
No, not into making a murder
connection here.
No. Yes, let me just cut out some of my background stuff, because I suspect sometimes when I start going live that causes one or two issues. I am not very good at, as I say, of shutting down stuff which I should shut down, because it just slows the computer down. So I do apologize for that. As we discussed a little bit beforehand, I'm looking at what's going on over there across the pond from 3,600 miles away. And I was just wondering what a sort of a Wisconsin lawyer makes of the situation. I do appreciate that you said quite rightly, I tend to try not to comment too much on what's going on sort of politically, because it's a good subject to avoid. But I was just wondering if you could give us a little bit of an idea as to what your impression is of what's been going on, shall we say, over the last few months.
I think I try to avoid some of that. Certainly in the social media political context, I don't see a real point in going down that rabbit hole and arguing. I don't have time for it, so I try to avoid it. But I'll be honest with you, Paul. I mean, I think the difference between human beings in a civilized society and just anarchy or animals living in the wild is the rule of law. And everybody wants to, when they feel they're wronged, they want to appeal to this rule of law and get justice. Yeah. And I think so far the proof is in the pudding, and there's been something like 60 lawsuits filed. And when you file a lawsuit, you want to make sure that there's evidence, real evidence, not rumors, speculation. Yeah. And I think so far the rule of law has won the day in our country. You're not going to win a lawsuit or a court case on a conspiracy theory. You have to bring admissible, real evidence, the facts. And so far, I think that the judiciary has been a great check and balance, and they're doing a great job. They're following the law, and I'm actually proud of that. And the other thing is, and we talked about this a little earlier, but it's not political. These judges making these decisions, I think the majority are conservative, appointed by Republicans, but you've got, maybe you've got some liberal leaning ones, conservative leaning ones, but if they're following the law, then that's something that everybody can rely on and everybody can look to. So far, that's what I would say would be the best thing.
Yeah.
What happened this week, I think, shocked everybody to the point of saying, I think most people can't even believe what happened this week happened. But when it comes to what's actually important and the election moving forward, I mean, 60 cases have been filed. I think the courts have reviewed them and followed the law in each and every case, and we're moving forward. So,
right. Yeah. I mean, as I say, it's one of these things that certainly with my circle of friends, shall we say, here in Galashiels, politics and religion is something that you try and avoid discussing, with, as you say, with family, friends, and, in social media. You'll very rarely find me post anything on social media about that kind of stuff. And on a happier note, we must mention, of course, the huge success so far this year of the Green Bay Packers.
Well, Aaron Rodgers, I mean, he had like 48 touchdowns and 5 interceptions.
Yeah.
Should be MVP. And everybody here, I think, was depressed for a little bit when we lost our left tackle. It was probably the best left tackle in the league. But then without him, they look good. Fill-ins are doing well. So, I to be honest, like I was telling you before, in my playoff draft for fantasy football, Aaron Rodgers is my quarterback, and I just hope I don't jinx him.
I'm sure you won't. I'm sure. I'm sure. Listen, I being a Scotsman, I very, 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 very rarely venture into the bookies and put a couple of quid on anybody. But I really do think that once the bookmakers open here in Galashiels, I might just put a couple of quid on the Packers, particularly as I believe in they get a bye, don't they, this weekend?
Yes.
And so next weekend, it's either going to be, did you say it's either going to be the Rams or is it the Saints or the Bears?
So, because they're the number 1 seed, they'll play the lowest seed that advances. Everybody was worried that they were going to have to play Tampa Bay because, of course, Tampa Bay beat up on the Packers this season. But now that the Rams upset Seattle, the Packers are either going to play the Rams or the Bears are playing the Saints right now. If the Bears win, they'd be the lowest seed. They would come to Green Bay. So we'll see. Yeah.
I mean, I must admit, I watched the first. It's on late at night here. It was on at about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I watched the first quarter of the game versus Tampa Bay, and I went to bed assuming that I was going to wake up the next morning to a 40-point drubbing of the Buccaneers, and the fact that they'd lost, I couldn't believe that, because in that first quarter, I mean, the Packers were 10-0 up in no time, weren't they?
Yes, I think they went right down and scored on the first drive.
Yeah. And you thought, how on earth is any team going to stop this? So I don't know. Maybe it was a bit of complacency on behalf of the Packers.
I mean, I don't know. They sometimes their defense lets running backs just run all over them, and then other times they look good. So, for example, against Tennessee, Derrick Henry, everybody thought he was going to have 200 yards against the Packers. The Packers held him under 100 yards, and frankly, I thought beat up on Tennessee. And now Tennessee lost at home today. But for us here in Wisconsin, I got to tell you, I mean, back to back NFL games Saturday and Sunday. It's good times right now.
Yeah. Now, you were saying that obviously the loss of Bakhtiari is a huge problem, but then I was saying about how I was surprised, was it last season, when they let Clay Matthews go. So I just think the Packers have got one of these teams where the Packers don't worry about who they play against. Everybody else is worried about them. That's my confidence anyway.
Yeah. But the Packers, I mean, last year, conference championship game, Raheem Mostert for the San Francisco 49ers put up like 4 touchdowns on him, and they blew him out. So I don't know. I wish we had Bakhtiari. I'm worried about it. I mean, that's Aaron Rodgers left side they got to protect, but I don't know. I just hope I didn't jinx them. I normally don't draft Packers on my fantasy football teams because I don't want to give them any bad luck.
Sure.
I took a chance this time, Paul.
Okay. One final question, and I suppose this is one that I have heard Charlie Barron's opinion of this, and it's the question: Brett Favre or Aaron Rodgers?
They're different players.
Yes.
Different eras. I mean, Brett Favre is a joy to watch. For pure entertainment, I think Brett Favre.
Right.
For pure quarterback play, Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Aaron Rodgers, he throws fewer interceptions, but Brett Favre, I mean, he would give up his body to get a first down, and he loves slinging the ball around. If you had to draft, if you were a GM and you're a brand new team, and they said you could have first year Brett Favre or first year Aaron Rodgers,
right?
Boy, that would be tough. I don't think you could go wrong with either one.
True. I mean, let's face it. I mean, we love both of them. I remember watching There's Something About Mary where Brett Favre makes that sort of cameo appearance, But then, that's really cool. But then I've seen photographs of Aaron Rodgers, and he dresses like the dude in The Big Lebowski, and I think, how cool is that,
He used to have long hair back in the day. I remember that. Yeah, he'd show up at the Bucks games. He'd have his long hair. He's a California boy. Yeah. But I mean, Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback, pure quarterback, when you look at numbers and interceptions and that kind of thing. But God, Brett Favre was fun to watch.
Sure. Yep. Moving swiftly on then. You mentioned about your colleague, is it Oswald, that makes one or two appearances in Making a Murder, and we don't get to see you in Making a Murder. We get plenty of Anjanette Levy. You telling me that you still keep in touch with Anjanette?
Well, we're still friends on Facebook.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know if she'd be willing to talk to you about all that stuff back in the day, but she's the one that gave me all the videos that ended up on YouTube,
right?
For like the spots on CBS and all that stuff. So she, great reporter. She would dig into. She didn't just want to make a story. She wanted to know really what the facts were and what the legal ramifications were. So she was a good reporter.
Right. Yeah. I must admit, I do take issue with one or two of the journalists over there in Wisconsin, particularly covering the case. One of the things that kind of bugged me was the fact that it was almost as if the state, they didn't have 3 special prosecutors, they had 4, what with Michael Holbach doing all his press conferences. And I just found it strange that somebody who was as narcissistic as Ken Kratz could give up half of his opportunities to be on television and give them to Mike Holbach. I just found that rather strange. But
I've never asked Ken about that, so I really don't know.
Yeah.
But I know he was trying to maintain the best relationship he could with the family. I know that for a fact.
Yes,
but I don't know if, I mean, it's generally something you don't see a lot of, is all those press conferences with all those facts coming out and everything. We talked about that a little bit the first time. You have to look at the ethical rules and try to figure out, as an attorney, can you really be talking about this stuff? But frankly, sometimes attorneys just don't care.
Yes. Because let's face it, I've certainly heard about this a lot, that there isn't a lot of there is this prosecutorial immunity whereby, and I'm sure you're going to, as a defense lawyer, agree with these, that, the prosecution lawyers, they can get away with so much that the defense, if they had done the same sort of things, they'd find themselves up in prison at times, But
I think that's true. Now, it's going to be anecdotal. I don't know if I have real empirical evidence of that. I've never studied all of the ethics violations and complaints. But certainly when I was doing a lot of criminal defense, I felt as though if a prosecutor did the same sort of tactic as a defense attorney did, if it was skirting the lines of ethical norms, the prosecutor wouldn't have to worry. The defense attorney would be the one facing issues. There's no question about that. And when it comes to just think about civil liability for a second, right?
Sure.
I can't give you a complete breakdown of where the law stands right now and suing prosecutors, but in general, they have incredible immunity. So anything that a prosecutor does during litigation is protected. Whereas a defense lawyer, I don't know if I want to name any names. In my area, everyone would know there was a defense lawyer who went to trial. His client got convicted. The conviction was overturned on appeal. And the reason it was overturned on appeal was because the defense lawyer had not hired an expert on an important material issue. Okay?
Sure.
So what happened was the conviction's overturned, and then the defendant, probably rightly so, sues his defense lawyer and gets a huge judgment. I think it was close to 7 figures. Wow. He went to prison for a couple of years. And the bottom line is the defense lawyer was accused of, and basically the jury found that he committed malpractice because he didn't hire an expert, right? Well, prosecutor's never going to have to worry about that. Prosecutor's never going to get sued. The risk is on the defense lawyer. And I mean, to segue here a little bit, if you look at the pending filings in the Avery case, the initial brief, and I sent you a link to it, anybody can look at it and read every word that Zellner has filed. Well, if you read that, I mean, she's got her initial brief of 150 pages, probably has a third or half of it talking about ineffective assistance of counsel. And so that falls back on the defense lawyer, and whether or not would result in a malpractice is a whole separate issue. But there's a lot of talk in there about ineffective assistance, and a lot of it has to do with failing to hire experts.
You've touched on a subject there that's quite interesting. I actually went to Amsterdam. It's just over 2 years ago. I said to my wife, would you like to go and see David Rudolph and Jerry Buting in, I think it was Edinburgh or Newcastle? And she was a bit sort of, no, not really, because I've been before. I said, well, how about going to see them in Amsterdam? And so we went to Amsterdam. And it was funny because right at the end of the conversation, when I was speaking with Jerry, I said to him, would you be interested in coming on and doing a live chat with Eric Ose? And he said, I've got to be so careful because he said, I am expecting to be called to an evidentiary hearing on ineffective assistance of counsel, and he has to be so careful what he says now, basically.
I think he does. I've only had to go through that. I've filed numerous motions in my career where I felt the prior attorney before me made significant mistakes, and when you do it at the trial court level, that's obviously the best. Before a trial, it's the best time to address that, so you can maybe redo a hearing or have a prelim or whatever. Because the trial courts, if their choice is let's give this defendant a due process hearing before we go to trial, that's a lot easier than waiting and going through a trial, having a jury come in, and then getting to overturn on appeal and having to do it all again. So I certainly was through that, and I lost a felony trial once, and the appellate attorney accused me of ineffective assistance, and I, frankly, I think a lot of defense attorneys, I don't take any offense to it. I want to cooperate. I went and testified. The court found that I didn't do anything ineffective, and but I was kind of pissed off that the jury convicted my guy in the first place. That's a whole nother story. It was a crazy case, and I was kind of hoping they would overturn it and get a chance to try the case again. But whatever. It's an interesting dilemma to be in, because you want if you believe in justice and that your client deserves another trial or is innocent, you want them to win and get back in court. But if the only way to do that is to have the defense attorney be held to have done such a poor job that he was ineffective, deficient performance, I mean, kind of sucks. I mean, but I think a lot of defense attorneys would prefer to see them found ineffective and their client get a new trial if they believe in their client's, innocence and believe in justice.
Yeah, I must admit, I'd have to say once again, observing from this side of the Atlantic, not just making a murder, but with so many cases, I get the fact that the adversarial system is there with regards to defense lawyers and prosecution lawyers, but the whole idea that you should have expert witnesses who are adversarial in their sort of, conflicting opinions, it just seems bizarre to me. An expert should come in and tell you exactly what the story is. They shouldn't be biased with regard to either being in support of the defense or the prosecution.
I don't know how you can ever eliminate bias.
Yeah.
If you can develop a system that can eliminate bias, more power to you, Paul. I don't know if any human civilization has been able to come up with that yet. And I deal with it all the time. If you look at my actual court record right now, I'm fighting on the civil side where insurance companies hire certain doctors to write reports.
Yep.
And I argued last month, and I'll argue again, I think in March, that these are not independent experts.
Yeah.
These are experts who are biased because they make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year from insurance companies. And if they stop writing reports that are favorable to insurance companies, that flow of funds is probably going to stop.
Yes.
If that's not bias, I don't know what is. Now for state witnesses, our state witnesses always going to be inherently biased for the state? I don't know. You find that it is a lot, but then how does a defendant, if you are accused of a crime and there's evidence that needs to be tested, DNA evidence, and you want to hire someone, Paul, to test that DNA evidence, you go out, you find an independent lab, you pay them. Is that lab going to be biased because you hired them? I don't know. Some may be. Some may not care at all because your fee to test that DNA is 1/1000th of what they earn that year, and they don't really, and the science is the science a lot of times. So can that really be biased? I don't know. But things like blood spatter, Do you see experts have completely different opinions all the time? Absolutely. Toxicology. Whether someone could form the mental intent. Do experts disagree all the time? Absolutely. Medical evidence. Do different doctors have completely different opinions on the medical evidence? Yeah, happens all the time.
Yeah, I suppose I may be sort of pointing out an obvious case, which isn't maybe the norm, but I'm thinking of somebody like this Dr. West, who was an expert on bite mark analysis, and all these cases of people that have spent years and years in prison based on bite mark analysis. And he would get up in court and say, he is guilty indeed and without doubt, and him and this guy, Stephen Haynes, the local sort of coroner, they made thousands and thousands, by telling the police that they could, they were the best people to hire in these cases because they could get you the conviction that you needed on this case, and maybe that's just a bizarre, that's sort of one end of the spectrum. As I say, it just bugs me a bit that, an expert should be an expert and they should just give their expert opinion. But yeah, you're right, Rob. It's difficult. Yeah,
Paul, that's not possible a lot.
Sure.
Because an expert can be an expert, but then later on be proven to be wrong. That happens all the time, right?
Yeah.
So experts can certainly disagree. If you have 90% of experts saying that climate change is the real thing, you got 10% that say that it isn't the real thing. I tend to go with the majority, 90%, right? But that is not guaranteed incontrovertible proof that they're right.
Sure.
So and think about when you've got things like Yeah, blood spatter. That's a real good one. I think the science is getting better, but you look back at, I think there were people that were getting convicted on gunpowder residue, and then they found out that simple household chemicals could leave the same type of traces that gunpowder would, right? So, I mean, this kind of stuff, I just don't know how you could get rid of bias, and I don't know how you can really, even video evidence sometimes, it doesn't tell the whole story.
Yep. I mean, one of the things that, sorry, just moving up back to Making a Murderer, one of the things that always struck me was that once it was released, there seemed to be a bit of an outcry from certain quarters that Making a Murderer was biased towards the defense. And my personal opinion is that when you've got so much of this case, the reporting on it was so biased in favor of the prosecution that of course they're going to see it as being biased in favor of the defense just because of what to them is the norm. But I'd really like to know what your thoughts are on the sort of the within Wisconsin and locally. What did people think generally of Making a Murderer? Was it much something they talked about much?
Yeah, I think we're talking big picture. Big picture, you got Making a Murderer, and I think it was generally in our community in Northeast Wisconsin, I think it was generally considered to be biased towards the defense. However, again, it's not empirical study, but anecdotally, I think the vast majority of people in the legal community that I deal with felt that Brendan Dassey got absolutely screwed.
Yeah.
So there's just so many things about that. You could start looking at all the specific things and talk about each little specific thing, why this was a bad situation for him. But from, a 30,000 foot view, it was in the community here. I think it was, most people believe the Avery case was not done perfectly and it was not real clean and there were some problems with it, but there was so much evidence against him, okay, that he was probably guilty and the Making a Murderer was biased towards his viewpoint, okay? But that Brendan Dassey, almost across the board, people are like, why is this kid in prison? This is absurd. It's wrong. All that. And then I think you got to remember, you can't, in our country, you're not supposed to be able to convict someone because they're probably guilty. It's supposed to be beyond reasonable doubt. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So that's always an issue. But then when Making a Murderer 2 came out, you and Eric Cozy told me I needed to watch it. So I watched it. It was probably right after we talked, so I don't remember all of it. But here's my view of that. The amount of work that Zellner and her investigator and her crew put in to everything from the burn pit to the salvage yard and the neighbor next door and the CDs that were missing and everything else. I was thinking, think about your average American citizen who doesn't have $1 million in the bank to pay for a defense.
Yeah.
Most people who are facing a serious charge won't get 1/100th of that kind of legal attention to their case.
Yep.
It's a little scary if you think about it from that point of view, that our system is completely based on the adversarial system being each side doing everything they can within the rules to win. So that hopefully the right side wins and you got a good result. But when you look at the amount of work that Buting and Strang put in for Avery was, probably 10 times you find in most cases. And then after the fact, because, Attorney Zellner is willing to put in all this time and effort.
Yeah.
She is almost literally devoting her life during that entire time to one client.
Yes.
So most attorneys certainly couldn't even afford to do that.
Yeah.
So the overview of that one made me start thinking, boy, how many thousands, if not millions of cases have people faced serious charges and they can't afford an attorney to put in any of that kind of work, can't afford any experts.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think, therefore, there was a question came up earlier on in the chat about, to ask Rob if he felt, and I kind of think I might know the answer to this. Should defendants be given more money to try and help defend themselves?
In the state, I can't really talk about other states, okay?
Sure.
But in the state of Wisconsin, it's been for 25 years, maybe longer, an issue with contracted public defender rates, okay? So in 1994, when I was taking public defender cases, so let's just say the public defender's office in Appleton, there's a big drug bust and there's 5 people caught, okay?
Right.
Because of conflict rules, the public defender's office will represent defendant number 1. They have to contract with 4 additional attorneys to represent the other 4 defendants, right? Everybody's got separate counsel, no conflicts. Well, I believe, this is going back a long time, but I believe I was getting paid something like $40 an hour to travel to and from court and $40 an hour to handle the case. And then 5 years later, they reduced that rate, so we were getting paid $25 an hour for travel, $40 an hour for the case. And I think I took on an attempted homicide case maybe 15 years ago or something, and the rates were still the same. And I think until they might have changed the rates in the last couple of years. But when I was on the board of the criminal defense lawyers in Wisconsin, we were always trying to get that rate up. There's no public sentiment to spend more tax dollars to help criminals defend themselves. Yes. Now remember, you're not a criminal until you're convicted. That's the way a lot of people look at it. So if anything, in my first 20 years of practice, the rates of reimbursement for public defender contract attorneys actually went down. Mm-hmm. So if you are running an office and you're spending $40 an hour just to have a paralegal, and then you're working cases for $40 an hour, you're probably going to go bankrupt. So it's very difficult. Now, if they would change that rate, I do think it would help. I just don't, there hasn't been a lot of public sentiment really towards doing that. And I think what would be great, I'm not saying I'll be able to do this someday if I had the necessary funds. I think it would be great to have a legal sort of trust fund where you have it funded by private dollars, maybe a public-private partnership, and young individuals like 17-year-olds in Wisconsin can be charged with crimes. Instead of having to go without a lawyer or having to go with a lawyer who's overworked or doesn't have time for the case, if you could go get a contracted attorney who's getting paid a reasonable amount of money so that they don't leave and they stay in that job, and they can give them a real good defense at no cost or little cost to that defendant, I think that'd be great. Because what really bothers me is when you have a 17, 18, 19-year-old kid, they make a mistake, like running from the police after they've gone through a stop sign or something, and they get charged with a felony, and now for the rest of their life, they're a convicted felon. And I don't like that. That kid may have trouble with school, with getting a job, everything because of one mistake. Whereas people who do that and they have the money to hire a good lawyer, oftentimes will work out a deal or fight it and win that trial or whatever, and they'll go on with nothing or little on their record. Sure, so I could talk to you about that kind of stuff forever.
Yeah. I mean, I think I might say that one of the sort of lawyers' mantras is that we're all greater than the worst thing that we've ever done. And
true.
I just wondered though if there's another saying. I can't quite remember how far it goes back, but somebody once said it's better that 10 guilty people walk free than one innocent person be convicted. but I just wonder if there really is that sort of desire, to have that in effect, that really, in a lot of cases, the end justifies the means. And if there's one or two people caught up in the net, so be it. I can't help thinking that, when, for example, when, the local sheriff or, the local DA or judges, when they are, applying for re-election, are they seriously going to say, well, I decided in favor of the defendant on this case because I summed up all the sort of the rational arguments of this and concluded this in a 30-minute commercial between the Packers games, as opposed to the judge that says, I'm tough on crime, I'm tough on crime, I'm tough on crime. And I just wonder, where is the sort of public perception is? Where
the public perception in the States, you can just YouTube all the commercials for judges and state representatives in Wisconsin. Look at Louis Butler, okay? Judge Butler was well known as a phenomenal, fair, learned jurist.
Right.
But because he had been a criminal defense attorney for part of his early career, he was on the Supreme Court. He lost his race, and what did the other side do? They said he was involved in putting criminals back on the street because someone he represented was charged with murder. Someone he represented was charged with sexual assault, and then the public perception that they try to create in the commercials is what kind of a person, what kind of a human being could represent another human being who's charged with sexual assault or murder. Okay, but in reality, everybody knows if your family member or friend is charged with a crime, that you would want them to get the best representation possible. You don't just say because someone claimed that my best friend committed sexual assault, they're guilty. That's absurd. But in the commercials, they try to make it look that way. So I don't know. Public perception and reality, to me right now, are there's a huge divide. Probably the biggest divide I've seen in my life, and I'm going to be 52.
You certainly don't look it, Rob. I must say that. and I enjoyed your comment about the who's that in my thumbnail. Oh, who's that thin-looking fella lawyer next to Angela Levy? I used to be 9 stone wet through, but not anymore, I'm afraid. I'm
drinking coffee. Normally I'd be drinking beer, but there's this keto diet thing where you stay away from carbs. And our friends this weekend convinced us we should give it a try so I can fit into my old suits and stuff, maybe.
But
otherwise I'd be drinking a beer, but this is coffee.
I've since the beginning of December, I've been very much more active, and I've tried to do my 10,000 steps every day, just by walking around the town and locally. And my wife gets me off often, gets me up really early in the morning, drags me out and about, and it does help. But yeah, your ketone diet, that's an interesting one, isn't it? Because my daughter is diabetic, and one of the things that diabetics need to do is to avoid going into what we call ketosis, isn't it? Whereby the body does start to burn off its own carbohydrate. But anyway, it's a strange one. That I just wanted to go back just briefly. You kind of touched on this. We look at Kathleen Zellner. I think a while back it was mentioned that she'd spent something like $600,000 defending Steve so far, but that's going to be small change compared with if hopefully Steve gets out, is exonerated, Kathleen Zellner files a civil suit against the state, whatever, if it was 36 million the first time, what it'll be this time. And if she's getting, her commission of 33% of that, you can see that, it's going to be peanuts to her to have spent $600,000. And I can't help thinking that at some point people are going to start asking the question, this is really false economy, you know, convicting people falsely and then having to spend so much money. I believe I read a figure somewhere that I think it's something like California, it might be Texas. In the last 20 years, they've paid somewhere in the near, I think it was California, something like 95 million just in, you know, in wrongful convictions, compensation. There must
But
come.
remember, Wisconsin
Yeah.
has that cap. We cap
Mm-hmm.
everything here.
25,000.
So, lawsuits for med mal, recreational immunity against government entities, they're all capped. You can't
Yeah.
get that kind of money. So the only way to do it, which is what I used to do, is file Section 1983. So under 42 USC 1983, that's the violation of your civil rights. Okay, there's no cap on the
Yeah.
federal civil rights, but that has gotten more conservative. So they basically, when I represented Ken Kratz, you know, he got sued for that sexual harassment, and that was in federal court. There's no cap to it. And that was interesting. It was Eastern District of Wisconsin. But what I've seen now over the years is right now I'm not really willing to take on a Section 1983 case if it's going to be here in the Eastern District of Wisconsin. And case in point is the Michael Funk
Yes.
murder in Neenah. Okay.
Yeah.
So if a hostage, true, he was armed, but we're a concealed carry state. But if a hostage gets shot 6, 9 times, whatever, by surrounding police officers, and while he's unarmed and still moving on the ground, they shoot him again. And the courts have said in our jurisdiction that's okay. The police can do that because they have immunity. You tell me what case is going to win.
Yeah.
What case is going to get around that kind of immunity that the government actors have?
Sure.
I mean, if you got an unarmed guy laying in an alley bleeding to death and he lifts his head up and you can shoot him again, boy, if government actors are immune for that kind of conduct, I mean, what do they have to do to be subject to a lawsuit?
Sure. I mean, I remember watching Brad Schimmel come and talk to people in Neenah about the Michael Funk shooting and saying, you know, you got to trust us. We looked at it all, and you know, we cannot find grounds on which to sort of bring charges against. Is it Craig Hopper?
He was one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just wondered if. Obviously, Brad Schimmel was around in the days of Scott Walker. Now we've got Josh Call and Governor Tony Evers. We know one of the things that Tony Evers has brought in is the pardons, or is that what it's called, the pardons board?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about that. So we've got Dassey's hoping for the clemency or a pardon, right?
Yeah.
So under Governor Walker, he got rid of that pardon board, and I don't remember when, but for years, no one's been able to get it. Evers brings it back. I do think it's a good thing. I don't think everybody should have their life ruined over a one-time mistake.
Yes.
Now, here's the thing. I just participated in a pardon recently, but my role is ancillary. I'm not the main lawyer on this stuff.
Sure.
I can tell you, though, the kind of the way it's worked is you have to fill out this application, and you have to, in our case, I represented a young lady 10, 12 years ago. Yeah. We got the judge to write a letter that we could submit with the pardon, and the judge said she deserves a pardon. I mean, you get that kind of evidence, that's great. So anyways, she's turned her life around. We submit that, and the next step is to get the interview with the pardon board, and then that goes to the governor, right? So in the last couple months, we've had one interview. They did it via Zoom. Client just came into our office and answered all the questions to the pardon board, and I think now that's on its way to the governor. And then we've had this other pardon where we got all the evidence together, including the judge who sentenced my client said she deserves a pardon. That's all down in Madison now. We're waiting to hear. So,
Yeah.
but I think the problem is when you look at this paperwork that you fill out and the questions that the pardon board asks and everything, I don't think, my personal opinion, I don't think Brendan Dassey should be in prison.
Yeah.
But his is going to be a very difficult case for them to overturn because, or to give him a pardon.
Yes.
Because most of these pardons are people admitting they did something wrong and they turn their life around. Okay?
Exactly. Yes.
This case is different.
Yeah.
I mean, he and all his supporters say this kid got railroaded and didn't do anything wrong. And I think it's telling. I don't know how many people are going to go read the briefs, but in Zellner's brief that's sitting before the Court of Appeals right now, I forget. It might be like page 23 or something. It's not completely relevant to her appeal, so she doesn't talk about it a lot. But I think a lot of people might be shocked by the fact that at Avery's trial, the prosecutors argued that all the evidence pointed to one man.
Yes.
And that this was Stephen Avery, and this is how he did it. Okay. And then at the next trial, they say all the evidence points to Brendan Dassey, and this is how he did it. And their theory is completely different.
Yes.
I think the average person, if they watched the argument in front of Avery and then watched the argument in front of Dassey, would say, well, the prosecutor is obviously lying because they can't both be true. How can these two people be convicted on different theories? Now, she addresses that, but it's not a big part of her brief. But if people want to, I say, don't watch what someone says on YouTube. Don't watch Twitter. If you want to know, for example, what the election lawsuit was about before the United States Supreme Court in November, log on and read the actual filings.
Yes.
And you can do that in every case. You can see what Zellner is arguing, how the state responded, and then how she responded. And there's a lot of very interesting issues.
Indeed, there certainly are. Yes, I mean, as you say, you've gone and watched it now, and the experts have. I think the term have sort of, she's got 10 of them in order to sort of basically I think the correct term is to impeach all of the evidence that was presented at trial. And I can't help thinking if even just one of those items of evidence, for example, the fact that this bullet that supposedly went through Teresa's skull doesn't have bone, but it's got wood on it. If that evidence had been available, even at sort of Steve's sort of first appeal stages, is that the sort of thing that the judge would say, there's something seriously wrong about this case? Well,
the state. This is an interesting point. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Talk about all the money that's spent. There's this concept of finality. When someone has lost a lawsuit or someone has, been convicted, you absolutely should have your post-conviction rights. Absolutely, if new evidence comes forward, like DNA proving you didn't do it, you should be able to go back to court. But there's a concept of finality. At some point, enough is enough, and you have to be done with it. A lot of times, the way a court obtains finality is not based on the facts, but on procedural grounds. So one of the issues in Avery's case is that, we supported Josh Krall, but Josh Krall has a job to do. He's got to try to uphold the conviction. That's his job. So I don't fault him for this. But the brief that the AG wrote in response to Zellner's request for the appeal for appellate relief, the brief from the state is basically saying the Avery had the opportunity to address these issues when he first appealed in 2013 or whatever, and he didn't do it.
Yes.
So because he didn't do it under procedural grounds, he waived that right. So the court should dismiss this appeal, right?
Yeah.
And Zellner's saying, wait a second, you have a gentleman with a learning disability who's trying to protect himself, who doesn't have access to this all this stuff, can't understand the cases that he put in his brief. He should have a real opportunity under due process to address it, right? I think from a pure justice point of view, I think most people would probably say, well, wait a second. Shouldn't he really have a chance to address the facts and
Yeah.
not just be dismissed on procedural grounds?
Yeah.
Like let's say you have proof that you are innocent. So Paul, you're charged with a crime and you get convicted, and you have 30 days to overturn that conviction,
Yeah.
and you find the proof. You find absolute proof, and you find the guy who did it, and he's admitting on camera he did it and how he did it, but you can't present that evidence until the 31st day.
Yeah. Yeah.
Should the court say, we're very sorry, Paul, but your conviction is going to stand because you missed it by a day?
Yeah.
That's a procedural thing, and I don't think that's fair, to tell you the truth.
Yes, and it was one of those things again that the dude just was going on about, was the fact that the state were trying to tell Zellner that she's procedurally barred, and then she's firing back with this word estoppel, that well, you're not allowed to change your story as to what happened, and it's
right.
It's gotten so crazy that I was rewatching some of Making a Murderer, where Kathleen Zellner was basically saying that I'm going to have to go with the story that with the fact that Dean and Jerry provided ineffective assistance of counsel, and you provided your own ineffective assistance of counsel. It's like crazy, but anyway,
it's real interesting. I want to ask you real quick, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but you think about this, right? So she says the CD from Mike Veely, and Mike Veely is a Grand Chute police officer. He was one of the first guys I dealt with 20 plus years ago because he was a computer guy, right?
Yes. Yeah.
He had all these expertise and got all the training. So he started doing all this computer work for everybody. And I always liked Mike, and he seemed to be honest with me. I was in his office many times looking at stuff, and he's showing me computer hard drives. And so Veely, let's just say, though, in 2006, 2005, 2006, they give the 7 CDs to the defense. So the prosecution gives you 7 CDs and says, here's the Dassey Janda hard drive. Okay.
Yes.
But they don't give them the CD that breaks out what Veely thought could be important to the trial.
Yes.
The search terms and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So now it's an issue. So Zellner's arguing, well, we didn't have that CD. That's a Brady violation. You should have given it to us. The state says, wait a second, you had it all. We gave you the entire hard drive, okay?
Yeah.
So we did give it to you.
Yeah.
So then Zellner's fallback argument is, you didn't give it to us. It's a Brady violation. You shouldn't have withheld that evidence. And even if that isn't a Brady violation, then Strang and Buting are ineffective because they should have got the in-case program and looked at the hard drive themselves, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't know. I think the problem that you find is there's so much that happens, so many witnesses, so much evidence presented in the case, that the Court of Appeals has a lot of outs, right? It'd be easy for them. It'd be easy for them to say, you know what, procedural problem, appeal dismissed or denied. Yes, we think there was some playing fast and loose with the evidence here, and we think that there may have been some problems. However, it was harmless error. There was so much other evidence that it doesn't matter. They have a lot of outs.
Yes, yeah. I think the exactly what you were saying there. This CD is an interesting thing because the as you say, the stipulation, I believe, from Ken Kratz was that you can just accept that you're lucky, guys. We did this review of Brendan's computer, and there's nothing much of evidentiary value. When in fact, the state clearly knew that it wasn't Brendan that had been looking at the disturbing images. But I think, am I right in saying that there's been a case recently within the last year? Is it called Wierski, where the courts have Wisconsin courts have said, that we cannot put up with this hide and seek carry on anymore, that that it can't be a case of the prosecution just hiding evidence and then the defense has to go and try and find it. Is that the right term?
I don't know. I honestly don't know because I don't keep up on all the stuff because I don't do any criminal anymore. It's hard enough for me to keep on the civil side and the federal stuff. but there very well may be, but that's the way it should be. You can't do hide and seek.
Yes.
But I have to question on the hard drive whether in fact that is hide and seek. If someone, if I'm representing you, and if you're my client and the insurance company says we want to see, all of Mr. Capaldi's tax returns for the last 8 years, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, just assume they can get them. Well, I might give them, if I have to give them to them, I might give them 8 years worth of tax returns, but there might only be 2 pages in hundreds of documents that are important to me and you.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell them that.
Yeah.
If I copy 2 or 3 pages and I email them to you and I say, Paul, these are the only, maybe they won't see them. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have an obligation to show that to them. But to be honest, I don't think that the state does either, except because of due process and Brady, if the state finds something that could be exculpatory, they do have to. I think they do have to point that out. And so I'm really interested to see how that CD issue turns out. I've read the state's arguments. The state's got good arguments that even if it is a violation, it's not important, whatever. But the state, I do believe I don't believe the state ever can hide exculpatory information.
Yeah.
I think that's the whole point of Brady. If you find a witness who says they saw someone else do it, the state can't bury that.
Yeah.
And so if Veely found evidence and he copied it onto a CD because he thought it could be relevant, if that's exculpatory, I think they have to give it up. Now the state's saying we did give it up. They did give it up, but they didn't really point it out. I don't know how that one's going to turn out.
Yeah. So one final question: what time do the Saints and the Bears kick off?
The Saints and the Bears are playing right now.
I better let you go. But I did.
Michael Thomas already scored for the Saints, and the Bears got the ball, and they're moving right now.
Right.
It's actually on the TV behind you.
Good stuff. And I just wanted to, one final question about Brendan's bid for clemency. I get the impression so far that everything that's been filed on behalf of Brendan has gone in front of this pardons board. I don't get the sense that Governor Evers has actually looked at it himself. Would that be right? That there's this board in front of him that sort of, they filter out what they want to look at, and as you say, it's this pardons board. It's really, as you say, for people that 10 years later, they want their license back so that they can go and do a bit of hunting, and right. So the felony or whatever charges, drugs charges, pardoned, and then they're able to apply again. Is that, have I got that right?
I think in your right now under the pardon process, generally Evers isn't going to see it until this pardon interview process has been concluded, and then I think what they do is they submit everything to the governor, and then the governor they give a recommendation whether it should be granted or not. Right. I don't know. Maybe Evers is too busy with COVID and everything. Maybe he's got people on his staff that will review it and then talk to him about it. Maybe he'll review some directly. Because of the Dassey notoriety, I think Evers he's aware of it. Yeah. It's unfortunate, and I hope I'm wrong. I just don't think Brendan Dassey's case lends itself to the pardon process because that's more a decision on the merits, whether or not he's guilty of anything, and that's not really what the pardon process is about.
Yeah.
So, I feel bad for Brendan Dassey. I do, but we'll have to see how that fight goes. We'll see what happens with the clemency. I only know this from the media. My understanding from some media reports is that Evers isn't really interested in any sort of clemency or pardon for Dassey, but I don't know if that's true or not. I have no idea.
Sure. And would I be right, as I say once again, observing from nearly 4,000 miles away, that one of the reasons why, if you like, Brad Schimmel in the past was was fighting so much. Brendan's case, was won in front of Judge Duffin, and then they won in front of the the Seventh Circuit, and then it went to this en banc hearing, and then we had these sort of like 6 amicus briefs even before the Supreme Court decided not to see it. Are they holding on to Brendan so much because to let him go would have some sort of impact on Steve's case?
That I don't know. I just think that people don't like to be proven wrong, and definitely if people have political ambitions, it's very difficult for them to admit they made a mistake. I mean, if you can explain to me why, when we did the Defense of Defense project 10 years ago, and I was on criminal defense board, it was basically just trying to let people know what defense attorneys do and why it's important. And a big thing we did was we showed, I mean, now it's got to be something like 400 people have been released from prison after DNA evidence exonerated them.
Yeah.
So if you can explain to me why you have solid DNA scientific evidence showing that the perpetrator in prison wasn't the perpetrator, and yet some prosecutors and some judges want to fight that and want to keep the person in prison, other than political ambition or something, I don't know. I don't get it. I think it should be easy. It should be easy to get someone out. But it's not always that way. Sometimes it's still a fight.
Yeah.
Is that because people don't want to admit they're wrong? Is that because people don't want the next election to have their opponent come out and say, look at what this guy did? It's this horrible situation. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, I did say one final question. I do have one final request. and that is simply that if I go through, I have got tons and tons of questions on the chat. If I go through the chat and sort of come up with some of the questions, would you please accept my humble invitation to come back on again in the not too distant future?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it was kind of sad. It's kind of sad. I kind of wish we would have done it when Eric Cozy was still around, because we had that opportunity. I love talking to him too. Yeah. That was a shocker. But yeah, you let me know. I mean, I don't think there's going to be any decision on that. Everything. I bet you. I don't want to predict. I think it's going to be a while before there's a decision. But yeah, let me know. I'd be more than happy to come back on.
Lovely. I think most people are predicting around about sort of April.
6 months,
based on the fact that the Court of Appeals could take that long to have a look. And really, people would say, well, it should be fast tracked or whatever, they don't need that long to look at it, but they do have to be seen to be given it their full consideration, don't they?
I think they do. I think sometimes, I wouldn't throw anybody under the bus because I don't know any of these individuals. I do feel like in my career there have been times when there's some real, I don't know, maybe you call it a sticky wicket, and there's an issue that the judges don't want to deal with because it is sticky, it is tricky. Zellner's raised a lot of those issues, and they don't necessarily want to make bad precedent, and so a lot of times there's these outs. And they can punt. They can punt it by saying the rules were violated, so procedurally, this appeal should be dismissed. So guess what? You never get an actual decision on the merits then.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's an easy out for them, just like harmless error is an easy out. If you say 10 pieces of evidence were submitted, 1 was faulty or inadmissible, however, it's harmless, conviction stands because there were 9 other pieces of evidence. Okay?
Yeah.
Those are outs, and if the court wants to punt, I think they have an opportunity to do that, which would be too bad, but I think they could do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We just have to be hopeful that that things will go the right way. I think the general consensus is the fact that the Court of Appeals remanded the case back to the circuit court twice. I remember hearing Steve Drizzen talking about the fact that every time you take a loss on something, it gets harder at the next round. It gets harder if you keep getting loss after loss after loss. So, it was almost as if this going backwards and forwards between Angela Sukovich and Paul Riley, it was like it was a win and a loss and a win and a loss. And it was sort of like, back and forth. We'll just have to wait and see. But anyway, listen, Rob, thanks very much for coming on. I'll go through the chat and have a look at the comments and the questions. And if we could get you back on again soon, I'll let you know. And
you know how to get a hold of me, Paul.
Exactly. And I did appreciate your comments about my accordion playing. So that's I actually.
There's a few of my guitars.
All right.
So
yeah,
I like music too, Paul.
Good, excellent. I've discovered in my research that there are two very, very good accordionists in Wisconsin. Charlie Barron's brother plays the accordion. So that's one person,
really?
Even called Charlie Barron's, and also Sheriff Herman, the now retired Sheriff Herman of Manitowoc County. He told me that his mum plays the accordion. So there you go.
It looks tough. It looks to me like it's tough to play.
It's it's actually, a lot of people say about on the left hand side, because you can't see what you're doing. Sometimes that's an advantage because you develop this sixth sense, and the right hand's like a piano. Seriously, the issue is the bellows. Trying to get the bellows in, moving in the right direction.
Difficult. There's a lot going on at once.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Anyway, it sounded good.
Cheers. Thanks very much.
Cheers.
And thank you so much for coming along and having a chat. And I look forward to having you back on soon, and we'll go through some of these questions.
Sounds good, Paul.
And let's hope that the Bears get through, and then it'll be good to wallop them again.
It's not looking good right now. They might have to play against the Rams, which the Rams are the #1 defense in the NFL, so that's a little scary.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm actually rooting for the Bears right now. How often do I say that?
I mean, the Rams, look, nobody, even the Chicago Bears that are used to that kind of temperature in the middle of winter, but the Rams, they're not going to look forward to going to Lambeau Field when it's freezing cold and there might be an inch of snow on the pitch. They are not going to look forward to that at all.
I agree.
Yeah.
knock on wood. I hope Aaron Rodgers was a good pick for me.
Exactly. Okay, cheers, Rob, and we'll catch you soon. And thank you very much for everybody that's contributed in the chat. And we'll see you soon.
All right, sounds good, sir. Take care.
And you. Bye for now.
Bye.